All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Cheska Cordero from Insightful Accountant and your host for today. Before we start, I want to go ahead and ask our question of the day. As you guys know, just as everybody's kind of coming in and settling down in front of your computers, your phones, or your tablets. And for those who are already in the room with us right now, feel free to answer too. It's encouraged. All right. Okay, so the question of the day is, okay, if a cassette or a disc, I know we all have AirPlay now, but if a cassette or a disc would have gotten stuck in your car's player and it would be stuck in a loop, what song do you think it would be playing?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. I know I
That
had to think about
is.
this one.
So I have to ask this contextually. So are you saying like if we were still using them today or like when they were popular, what were we listening to back then?
If you had it now.
If I had it right now,
Yeah,
mm,
if it were to happen to you now.
just
Well,
one song.
if you want to have it like back in the day, or an album maybe, just because
Well,
those is how.
I I think growing up, I loved those like mixed CDs. You'd pay someone like $1 to make them for you, and it
Yeah,
would
to
take like
burn
an
them.
take an hour to burn. And
Yeah.
it was like Napster or something. I don't even think that's like still around. So right now, I always do
No.
Sirius, right? So like I think it would be some sort of country mix because I surprisingly like country. So like
There
today's
you go.
hits of country.
Yeah. You were a big Columbia House fan back in the day, weren't you, Julie?
I didn't do it because I was afraid of getting in trouble, but I would definitely pay my dollar to get my mixed CD.
Right. Right. I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Man, for me, I am all over the map. Like I don't even know. Um, I'm one of the few that might listen to like hard rock and classical in the same day. So just kind of a little bit of a mix, but right now I've got a For King and Country worship CD that's definitely on spin in the van, and it's probably where we rolling right now, Jessica.
Okay. Got it. Well, I already asked this question of the day a few webinars ago, and I think what I answered, if it was back in the day, I would probably have I said the song that would probably be playing would be Waterfalls or No Scrub, just because I really like TLC. Okay.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm an R&B girl at heart. Okay.
There we go.
Anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Again, I'm Cheska Cordero from Insightful Accountant and your host for today. Now, in this practice management talks, we'll help you how to make sure you have the right people in the right seats. With the amazing Will Hill and Julie Smith, I'll hand this off to them in just a little bit after I cover a few of the housekeeping items. Now, there is no CPE for this as it is just a 30-minute webinar. And if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A panel. And remember to be specific. Don't just say what you mean. You got to ask what you mean by you like the song or whatever. Mainly because they might not get to your question right after you put it in there. We will be sending you a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording after the webinar. And it's also going to be up on our YouTube channel within about 24 hours. So if you want to go check that out over there, along with many other webinars that we've done in the past that might be of interest to you. I'll also be putting that link to our YouTube channel right into our chat. And also, do not forget that we have many webinars for you every month, whether you're interested in practice management like this, marketing, everything tax, or all things QuickBooks. Insightful Accountants got something for you. Now, you can check out all of our webinars that are available to you over on our educational webinars page on our site. And don't worry, I'll also be putting that link into our chat as well. Now, speaking of webinars, mark your calendar for Insightful Accountants Future Forward Integration and Workflows on May 21 to 22, and get ready for 8 exciting webinars over 2 days, where each is eligible for a CPE certificate. Now, don't miss out on this opportunity to enhance your skills and stay ahead in the industry. And if you haven't subscribed yet to our newsletter, join the tens of thousands of accounting professionals who rely on Insightful Accountant to keep them up to date on news and updates impacting today's accounting professional. Now, I will be rolling out all those links, so many links, and the copy of the slide deck throughout the webinar in case you might have missed it the first time I put it up there. So watch out for that in the chat. And actually, Julie and Will, that's it for me. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go on that. And hey, Will, we're talking about the right people in the right seats. I hope you aren't teaching that QuickBooks class, right?
No, that would be the wrong seat for me. And as you see from my intro, I don't do QuickBooks, right? So glad to have been part of this profession for a long time, but QuickBooks, I have my accountant help me, and they kind of shake their head every now and then. If I ever master the whole mismatch transactions thing, I'm going to pat myself on the back. So,
hey, it's not your forte. That's okay. And it's not mine either. Will and I have been, going at this for, almost 8 years now, Will? We've known each other, I think.
You're getting old,
And
Julie.
I know. Good thing they have some filters or something, just not today. And just really have, had a passion for helping to change CPA firms and even the industry just to, make that move forward. And I think, you guys can all see is like I am taking some time off after tax season, which I hope everybody on this call is too, taking some time to just detox, reflect, have some awareness around, what happened, what can we change, what did you do really good, and just be able to then make those quick fixes and or do those long-term strategy, ideas that you had in tax season. But the one thing, Will, that I know both you and I see is coming out of tax season. You talk to someone in tax season and they've got 5 things they're going to do after tax season, right? And then you talk to them like today and they have compartmentalized anything that happened in tax season and are just moving forward. And I just want to remind you that you're going to be in the same position that you are today if you don't just take some time to just reflect, have awareness, strategize, whether that's talking, with a partner or another person of leadership, and just really honing in on trying to get your firm where you want it to be. And Will, I know you've seen this all too well.
They say time heals all wounds, and for many things that's actually not true. And in fact, instead, what time does is it distorts the reality of either the pain or the benefit. It can make it smaller or make it greater, depending on perspective and scenario. But a lot of times, the pain we feel in tax season, the longer we wait to address it, the more we go, nah, I guess it wasn't that bad. And then we're going to get there next year and go, oh no, I remember this now. It was bad. And we just put ourselves in that loop. And some of that comes from a personnel issue of people not doing the right things, not being assigned in the right roles within the firm, or not being staffed up well enough to deliver a way that we want to promise to deliver. So I think that's why we're talking about this today, Julie.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And so getting the right people in the right seats, you can see this quote here on the screen, but oftentimes people kind of settle for, hey, we've got a body and at least they show up. I know we're in the same boat. We've heard that, like, well, they show up, they at least do most of the work, right? And so it's just really, you want to set your whole firm up for success, the rest of your team up for success. And sometimes hiring someone just because of those ideas or what they're fulfilling is not going to get you to the next level, which is where we want you to be, hey, in 30 days, 60 days, and definitely come next tax season. And so, Will, when we talk about creating a position, which is, kind of the next thing, is it's changing that mindset, right? It's changing it from, hey, I saw Sarah, who I used to know from here, who then was here, and I just got reintroduced to her from this person I saw at the grocery store, and she needs a job. How do we think we can make that work? Instead, it's changing your mindset to creating that position and defining exactly what you want, whether it's tangible, intangible, whatever that is, and being able to go from there. And I think all too often, people do that sort of thing. Well, Sarah needed a job and I saw her mom at the grocery store. So, we thought we could use a second receptionist. It's working out, right? And so you're setting not only the firm up, but Sarah up for failure just straight from the start because there's no role, there's no expectations. The rest of the team doesn't even understand what she's doing, right? And people can grow into roles
Yeah.
and that can happen. But I think really setting and defining that before finding the person is where that success comes from.
And I think you're spot on it. When people first hear someone say, well, shouldn't hire someone just because you know them, our minds kind of push back against that and say, hey, we're supposed to hire for culture and fit over technical skill. But the challenge there is, even if they're a great fit from a team culture perspective, if they're not adding value and contributing to where it's necessary, then it's going to get really awkward. And your, hey, this person's a good cultural fit becomes, they should be a good cultural fit, but there wasn't a place to fit. So the wheel, when it turns, gets bumpy. And that's not comfortable and that's not healthy. So it's not just about the good culture fit, it's about understanding what are the roles and responsibilities that we have real need for. So I think you got something coming up in a couple slides, so I'm gonna swallow the rest of my words and let you move on from there, Julie.
Well, and Will and I were just having a very organic conversation before the webinar started. And I think it's, not only creating a position, but understanding your internal hierarchy. You can change it at any given time. And Will and I were just having a dialogue about, I was just reflecting on tax season and had made some notes, and I'm going back through them shockingly right now. And I'm very open to, making a tweak and changing our entire hierarchy and kind of how the workflow flows, because I think we're at a point now where that's what would be beneficial for the entire firm and for the entire team. And don't be fearful of that, because as you are, a partner, a leader in your firm, probably your team's feeling the same exact way. They just don't know how to go about doing that or approaching that. So if you're feeling that way, definitely sit down and have a conversation and evaluate, because you're probably onto something and it's probably exactly where you need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I agree.
So where to find people, Will? People, of course, where to find people. Another organic conversation. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about changing my hierarchy. This is kind of what I'm looking for. And I'm like, well, if you know anyone, um, it's a lot of word of mouth. I do think it is. But once you've been able to define that position, you're kind of able to let that go, right? Instead of trying to fit someone into a position. So once can define that and you have all of that there, you can go advertise, put it on your website, do the word of mouth, do LinkedIn. I've had success with Accounting Fly over the last few years for not just my firm, but several other firms. But don't be afraid to go outside that box of where you tend to find people, right? Tend to look outside of it, because that's usually where you'll find a gem, someone who didn't even know that they were looking for you. Or maybe it was like Will, who didn't know he was actually going to be decent at QuickBooks. But with a little bit of refining and training, he's going to be a successful teammate. And that's where I say, I said in the time before, it's making that list with that tangible and intangible, and then making maybe it's your top 2 or 3. I know Will and I have talked about this before, that are like, you don't negotiate those, whatever it is. And then being able to kind of back into then finding the right people.
Right. So your middle bullet here, now all the audience knows which one of us created the slides. But on always be always be networking, some may look at that and say, well, how does that jive with what you just said in the previous slide of define the role first? And I think it meshes quite well, because if you're always networking and keeping track of like, hey, I met Julie, she seems personable, she seems coachable, and she knows how to have an actual conversation with another human. Great. Those are 3 things that I want to see. I can continue to build my list of people that fit some of the culture fit, that will be able to handle a lot of the abstract items that we work through in the firm. But then as I say, all right, I'm here, I'm defining these roles, I go back to my list of people I've met through networking and say, hey, I've got a role now. Here are all the people. And I'm going into those that I've already had some conversations with. Um, most people that, especially in smaller firms, are working in are not necessarily coming from zero job at all. And so it's not like, ooh, if I don't go nab Jim right now, he will never be there. How about we just have a conversation with Jim? Hey, you know what? If something comes up, we're going to keep you in mind. And if you've got a list of top tier candidates of like, when the role's right, these are the people that may be a good fit, are you reaching out to them randomly, frequently, right? Every 6 months or so. Hey, still wanted to let you know we're thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. We're continuing to build and develop our firm. It just putting some of those messages out there while the roles kind of develop, so that that network is continuing to be stirred, as it were.
Well, I even think to build on that, Will, it's like if you go and you've defined that and you tell your centers of influence, like even sending an email like, hey, I'm excited, we're growing. Here's exactly what we're looking for. People want to naturally help. So they're going to be racking their brains. And if they're your centers of influence, they're not going to give you anyone that, is going to be a little off the trail, right? Because that's their reputation on the line as well. And I think the other one to include in this, and we go through this internally in our firm, once we define something, is who do the people in your firm know? They tend to hang out sometimes, they tend to have their own, networking groups or their own groups that they hang out with, or if they graduated from a university, they may still, affiliate with those. They may be your best resource in regards to finding people. And they're going to bring in people they want to work with because they understand the culture, they understand the team, and they understand the role better than anyone else. And so sometimes looking inside and just asking, right? Asking for that, hey, do you know anybody? Here's exactly what we're looking for. You'd be surprised how many times they actually do know someone. They just don't, it hasn't come to the forethought of their mind of what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what about interviewing, Julie? What are some of the things that you think are really critical to this interview process to help make sure that they're going to align with the values and the culture?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say the one that we talked about earlier because I'm going to give you that one, okay? Um, I definitely think personality tests are really important. And it's not just, Will and I were talking about this before, it's not just during the interviewing process, it is throughout their career with your firm. So, as we're done with tax season or we're reevaluating, what we're doing, it'll come time where everybody in our firm is going to have to take a personality test again, right? It's an annual thing. I think it's just really important from a leadership perspective that you understand what is driving your people, each individually, not as a whole, right? And how do you manage them? Because everybody needs spoken to differently. Everyone, needs to be managed differently, motivated differently, all the things. So I think, personality test is really important. And Will, if you want to kind of talk about the one that we were discussing earlier, I think it's really
Yeah,
important too.
yeah, I think, you mentioned the experience of, we'll refer to this as newer hires overselling themselves and what they were good at
Yeah.
and executing in their prior firms. I have a number of firm clients of mine that have wrestled with that over the last couple years as frankly, the transiency has increased between accounting firms and people saying, hey, I'm a senior level accountant. I'm a senior level bookkeeper. I'm a tax reviewer. Well, how do we know if those things are really true besides what they're just telling us in some of our gut tests? And there's an organization out there. They're actually originally based out of Australia, called Account Tests, and they do a great job of being able to go in. They can quickly take some assessments around accounting, bookkeeping. I believe they're adding in tax knowledge as well. I have to double check that. Don't take my word on that one yet. That was in the works last time I was talking to that organization. Um, but just to give you a sense of, hey, did their skill line up with what they said? A lot of firms will use a tool like that. Maybe they're a right culture fit. Hey, do we pay them at the bottom of the range, the top of the range based on skill? That kind of a test can kind of validate that and help you slot them into the right spot or be able to set the right expectation with how much training time you're going to be spending on them from a technical perspective. So account tests was that. And someone just put in the comments that they just started using them. They do tax audit and client accounting services. So some confirmation on the tax piece. Thank you, for that in the chat there as well. Real
Well,
quick,
and
Julie,
Will just,
speaking of chat, we got a
yeah,
question, and this is a
awesome.
question for you. Um,
Okay.
when you go to ask the team for referrals,
Mhm.
how do you really position that, especially when it comes to like, hey, my brother, or I've got my best friend, and are they just trying to help someone out versus helping the firm out, where that balance lies, and how do you work through those scenarios, Julie?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think, you might get some of that, but I also think that is that employee's reputation on the line. And, I've dealt with a couple of those and I say, hey, send me the resume. I'm always looking for people. Let's see if they're the right fit for this. But if not, you know what, I'll keep it on file. Just, you never know, how much we're going to grow and what we may need. And I think it's not, necessarily shutting it off, right? It's being open to it, looking at it, and then being able to make that decision for yourself with your team, right? And hey,
Mhm.
what if their brother is a CPA who's just they've heard great things about your firm and they just are really looking. And so I say just go into it with an open mind, gather all the information, and then be able to react in a very factual way instead of, maybe an emotional way.
And the more you know about what role you're trying to fill, the easier it is to handle. You might have a superstar bookkeeper that's trying to get their brother hired, and you don't want to upset your superstar, but what if their brother's questionable, right? Well, if we're more clear on the role that we need, it's easier to hold them up against the measurement of the role, not the emotion of the referral, right? So we'll go back to what you said first about knowing what you're hiring for as being an important part. So good.
And just a
Hey,
good good question. Sorry, I'm going to say one more thing is when we ask internally, or I advise a firm to ask internally, it's usually we kind of have some sort of conversation at a team meeting that this is going to happen, right? So you strategically have put it out there. Everybody can feel a sense of relief because now you're being transparent, communicating about what's going to come. Because more than anything, teammates hate when there's someone walks through the door and they're like, we didn't even know we were hiring, right? So having that transparent conversation up front, and then usually I send out an email and I attach the job description with it. And then I say, hey,
mhm.
everybody's got to kind of come through me. And so you're setting the expectation from the start of exactly what that looks like. And I think that will set everybody up for success and then also help everybody think through who they're going to give you.
There was one other question that came in referring to the prior slide. I advanced too quickly. Do we think everyone should take a personality test? You guys do that at your firm annually. I agree that everyone should. And I think a lot of it is really understanding your team, because with these personality tests, it's not about, ooh, I want to learn more about me, even though that's often how they're marketed. The real value is how I know me and how I know Julie allows me to interact with Julie in a more effective manner. I can communicate better. I can understand my audience a little bit more clearly, know what motivates, drives, pushes, so forth. And so there's a lot of value from that perspective there. So
You hit the nail on the head with that one, Will.
actually, every now and then, the nail goes. So talk a little bit about onboarding. I mean, I think this slide speaks for itself, but
Yeah, I
talk.
couldn't agree more with you. But it's all about setting people up for success, right? So when you have a process for onboarding new employees to the team, how do you shorten, it says shorten the learning curve. What do you have in place so that everybody is on the same page with the same expectation, right? So for us, we created a team playbook, and every firm I go into now, I kind of use that same template for everybody to do it. But what's the expected hours worked? What's the reimbursement for CPE? What's the vacation look like? I mean, ours even goes into detail into like, what is every technology thing that we own? How do we use it? Right? Because you'd be surprised what, Will and I, or you guys take for granted in regards to, well, we've been around older tax for so long. It's everybody should know exactly what it is. And you bring someone who's used a completely different program, been in a completely different culture, and they have to ask the question, well, I assume this is your tax program, right? Ours goes into how do you enter in time? What does that look like? What's the accountability factor? When will your review be? What standards will you be held to? And so if you can be completely upfront and transparent from the beginning and have those processes in place, you're going to set everybody up for success. Where I see things kind of go awry is someone says, well, I thought someone told me this, but now this person tells me this. Well, you signed off on your team playbook. What does it say in there? Right.
Yeah.
And so just taking that all off the table, I think really helps not only the team, but it helps that new hire as well.
So let's talk for maybe I'm going to talk for just a quick minute here on setting expectations and especially remote team members. And
Yeah.
you've got to set the expectation early. It's critical in office or remote. In office, if you give them a little bit of grace, it's sometimes easier to rally back in and say, hey, you've been here for 3 weeks. We gotta step forward a little bit. Or you've been here for 2 months. We gotta produce a little bit more to where the expectation is. The longer runway you give them before getting to the real expectation of everyone, the more of a challenge you will have to get them there in any kind of decent time frame. And that amplifies in difficulty when you're remote. So you want to set those expectations and have the benchmark soon. Like, hey, maybe it's a bookkeeper and you want them doing whatever 20 sets of 20 sets of books a week. You guys can make fun of me for my number there later on. But you might say to them, if they're experienced, but say, hey, you're going to come in, learn our processes. First couple weeks, we're going to have you sitting at 10. 2 weeks after that, 15. And then starting in week 5 and forward, we want you up at 20 per week along with everybody else. So I want to set that expectation early, tell them where the graduation is from starting level to real production and expected production level, and be able to hold them to that. If I say to them, hey, we're going to start early, we'll get you slow, and then we'll get moving, but I give no deadline and I give no sense of what that pace ought to look like, especially if they're remote, it's going to be hard for me to push that pace in the right way. So just something to keep an eye on from an expectation and remote perspective, especially.
And Will, just to build on that, and free piece of advice is when you're onboarding, especially remote people, but this holds true with in-office people, set cadences for meeting right up front, put them on the calendar. We're meeting every week for the first 6 weeks, and then whatever you want after that. That for us has really helped figure out maybe if someone's completely on board or maybe they have one foot in, one foot out type of situation. So I just would definitely, try to have some sort of cadence where you're holding them accountable. I know we're running out of time, so we will roll through this because obviously it's something we're passionate about, but it's, retention is also something that people talk about. Not only do you have to go find the people, right? Then you got to get the right people in the right seats, but now how do you retain them?
Yeah. No, this is a really good point. And I think one of the things we need to look at is when we're identifying the roles that we may need, what if you've got someone internally that might be a better fit of their strengths in the role you need than their current role? Having that conversation, showing that this is about the firm, but also about them because you're invested in them as well. So I think that's something to certainly keep your eye on. And then I want to spend a moment here. Julie, do you know what the worst thing you can do is when you make a bad hire?
Keep them.
Yeah, let your ego get in the way, right? Let your ego get in the way. Well, I hired them. I'm going to fix them. So, some things can't be fixed. Some things can't be fixed. Some things don't work. And if you want to alienate and make retention more difficult, keep the ones that don't work. And the ones that should work and are working or were working will begin to fall down to that level or be frustrated and leave. So if you made a bad hire, hey, that's just life. This is not perfect science. Move on. And frankly, it's best for them, right? That person knows they're not a good fit. They don't want to admit it any more than you want to admit it. And so letting them go, giving them that freedom to go find a better fit for themselves is good for them too.
And if you've ever heard yourself say, well, we'll just make it work because I need the work done, that is your number one clue that you probably got to let them go. And there's a better person out there to fit not only that job that you have, but for your firm as well.
Right, right. Well, Julie, I think we managed to put about 3 hours of conversation into 30
Yep.
minutes. We're wizards like that. So, Cheska, thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks on the dot too. Well, thanks, Will and Julie, and everyone for taking some time out of your day to hang out with us. And right before we close out this webinar, remember that we have a variety of webinars for you every month, and you can check those out on our educational webinars page. And don't forget to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel and newsletter so you don't miss out on news and updates that impact today's accounting professional. And thanks again, everyone, for today, and we'll see you in next month's session of Practice Management Talks. All right, everybody, bye. Have a good day.